So welcome, everyone. Let's get started. Again, my name is Edith Macker. I'm the Environment Director for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and I am filling in for Mayor Kevin Burns, who's Mayor of the City of Geneva, Chairman of the Environment Committee, Energy Subcommittee, and Executive Board Chairman for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I want to give a shout out to Neil James, our Executive Director, who is also with us today. And I'll start with some opening comments. We have a really great a set of speakers for you today. We have a panel of community leaders who will tell us about solutions and thinking through ways to address extreme heat. And we have some Zoom poll questions to find out what everybody's doing. We're really pleased with the turnout today. Again, this is a joint committee meeting of the Environment Committee and the Housing Committee because the two are so intertwined in response to impacts of extreme heat related to climate change. So in 2021, our climate action plan for the Chicago region did a climate risk and vulnerability assessment and identified the greatest risks in our metropolitan region to climate change. And extreme heat was a very highly ranked issue. It is ubiquitous, second only to flooding throughout the Chicago metro region. But in our region, in the Great Lakes region, we haven't done a lot on extreme heat. There's been some learning that happens, but it feels very much like we're at an opportunity where we can learn from others' experience, build off of our plan, learn from one another, and to work together to find solutions and be prepared for extreme heat. Because of where we are with relatively cooler temperatures and access to water, we learn from other parts of the country, like local governments in the South and Southwest that have much more experience in managing extreme heat and the public health impacts they may cause. Purpose of today's meeting is to explore what municipalities are currently doing and what they can do to mitigate heat-related threats to public health and safety. So no one here is an expert, but we're putting our heads together and learning as we do in the Mayor's Caucus. So the joint committee meeting today with housing will focus on planning and investments to improve housing and neighborhoods to better protect vulnerable residents from extreme heat. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Mayor Katrina Thompson, Mayor of the Village of Broadview, and Housing Committee Chairman for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, who's very active both in the Environment Committee and in many activities of the caucus and on climate preparedness. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Edith, and good morning, everyone. I want to give gratitude to Ben Chanel, who's the staffer that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us on the Housing Committee. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you, Ben, and you'll hear from him later on. I'll start by sharing some background on why this topic is relevant to the Housing and Community Development Committee. And the 1995 heat wave was the deadliest weather event in Chicago history. Extreme heat lasting over several days and nights, coupled with inadequate communication, infrastructure, and social and emergency response, led to 739 tragic deaths. Most victims were poor and elderly. This event is inedible in our collective memories and serves as a warning about potential impacts of future heat waves. However, the 1995 heat wave resulted in major reforms to Chicago's emergency response programs. The city formed a commission on extreme weather conditions, developed a comprehensive extreme weather operations plan, and established better coordination among emergency responders, call centers, and traffic management. We hope to continue learning to strengthen our collective capacity to respond to extreme heat. As Edith said, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the options that municipalities have to proactively plan for extreme heat impacts in our communities. We'll start by welcoming Dr. Ashish Sharma. Dr. Sharma is the Climate and Urban Sustainability Lead with the Discovery Partners Institute, which is part of the University of the Illinois system. Dr. Sharma has expertise in astronomic science, focusing on regional climate, air quality, and assessing adoption and mitigation strategies. He has both a master's and PhD in aerospace engineering. Ashish is a contributor to the caucus Climate Action Plan for the Chicago region and a frequent collaborator with the caucus. At this time, let's welcome Dr. Sharma to our platform. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction, Mayor Thompson. I'll share my screen. So today I'm going to talk about a toolkit that we are developing in collaborations with the caucus, which is called as eJust, Environmental Justice Using Urban Scalable Toolkit. Before, and we have had partnerships with Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, and NASA that has supported these kind of environmental work within Chicago region. Before I go deeper, I'd like to give an overview of what extreme heat is, what urban systems are, and then we'll talk about the toolkit. So if you look at urban systems, those are multi-scale, interdependent, social, natural, and engineered complex systems. Here you'll find an infrared movie that shows the heat distribution from infrared camera around Chicago. And you can see my colleague walking through this. And then, as you can see, humans also contribute to urban heating. We account for 50% population in urban areas. And over the next 25 years or so, we'll have around 68% of populations living in urban communities. So I think the question is pertinent: how can we make sure urban areas are resilient to extreme heat and other environmental hazards? If you look at current environment, then this is a schematic around Chicago area, which shows Lake Michigan, high rise and built environment, and rural landscape, as well as industry. We see that current environment has a lot of heat, urban heat island effects, and a lot of energy stress as well resulting from that, and also associated air quality issues. What our vision is, how can we create an environment which has a much more adaptive choices so that we can have much more greenery, low energy stress, and low urban heating. So we want to achieve this, and how can we do that? That's where we put a lot of effort in creating solutions and doing fundamental and applied science. So in simple terms, I'm a climate scientist working behind a desk running computer models, and we try to assess what the impacts of heat are. We work at different scales. This is at regional scale. For example, this shows the whole Chicago metro area, showing how heat distribution is around this region. Based on the questions that we are trying to answer, we go down to further scales and look at those assessments. And when we go to those scales, we also try to address these questions at different spatial resolutions. For example, here we are looking at census tracts, but here we are looking at 1 kilometer grids. Likewise, we even go to neighborhood scales to really address issues which are very localized, that can be targeted to, for example, where the stagnation points happen, where the airflow cannot get out of the urban canyons and then create a lot of vulnerable locations. So we do a lot of this research across scales as well. Before we go deeper, I'd like to also talk about vegetation as a prime to reduce heat, but we have done assessments where we have figured out that we generally talk about urban heat island effects, how heat impacts the urban areas, but also how carbon dioxide that is impacted from urban vegetation can also combine with heat and create a benefit or harm to the urban environment. So we have done this assessment where we are looking at net carbon exchange under normal conditions, under heat wave conditions, under drought conditions, and then moist conditions, as well as when to irrigate and when excessive irrigation happens, what happens to heat, as well as what happens to CO2 emissions. We have created an environmental benefit score around this to really help municipalities decide what should they do under different environmental conditions, looking at droughts or when the temperatures are really high, how will it benefit carbon sequestration goals, so that the municipalities can advise their constituents on taking relevant actions. And we can talk more about this some other time. Now I'm going to talk about how we are working at scales where communities live. And here, for example, we have taken the data sets from PRI, Prairie Research Institute, where they have the LiDAR scan maps. So here we are taking a scan around this cross-section, and we have tailored the data so that we can really look at fine scale features within the urban canyons. For example, the light poles and the building heights. And that has helped us to create morphology and building height maps. We are able to really find what the tree canopy is and the tree crowns, as well as where the buildings are. Using these methods, we have really found out that what the tree canopy for the Chicago region is. This is an example over the city of Chicago. In the past, a lot of studies have used this tree canopy, but we have found that we have a different tree canopy and compared with observations which is the LiDAR data set. We have also mapped the building height. These maps are at 1 feet resolution, and this data is open source and available. We have a journal article which is under review, which hopefully would be published maybe this month or next month. So we have created these data sets for communities to use, for researchers to use, and for practitioners to use, and creating toolkits that will be embedded with these data sets. Giving you a flavor of how these data sets looks like. This is, for example, the downtown Chicago. We can resolve every building at a 1 feet resolution. Of course, we get stuck when we are looking at underground and those kind of really hard landscapes, but I think this gives a good kind of depiction of the urban morphology, especially in downtown areas where it's really hard. Using these data sets, we have created temperatures maps. This is just showing examples around the city of Chicago. We are creating the templates around the city, and then plan is to scale it for the whole Chicago metro area. So this shows temperatures at street scale, and I'm going to show more detailed maps and so. So what we have done is we have used street observations. As you can see behind me, there is a sensor placed here, which is the one that you can see placed within the city at multiple locations. Using those sensors, we have used parcel level land use data set that CMAP has, and a lot of data set that City of Chicago has on their data portal. Combining that with the LiDAR morphology that we have developed, and also the core work that we do in urban modeling using the regional climate models. And since we have to go down to the scales where communities live, we have used machine learning algorithms. And using those algorithms, we have started forecasting temperatures at street scale. And I'm going to give you an example here. So this is an example at street scale. We can go to any neighborhood now and then show what the temperatures would be. Just zooming in and showing the temperatures here for the downtown area. So we are combining different scales of data sets. Generally, a lot of data sets sits with municipalities, which is by the academic community is never used, but we are trying to grab whatever we can so that we can make much more realistic predictions. These things can also help our urban planning questions related to siting trees. ComEd is planning to put trees where they serve, and we are helping them looking at afforestation scenarios. Likewise, City of Chicago is also has a really strong tree canopy mission, and other municipalities in the Chicago area. We are ready to help these municipalities make informed decisions where they can really benefit from planting trees. So if you have questions along those lines, we are happy to collaborate. So this map really shows it would not be advantageous, for example, to put trees here, while it would be really helpful to put trees where where the temperature deviations are really large. Sorry. Now I'm going to talk about environmental justice aspects. These are standard environmental justice definitions that we have borrowed from EPA. Environmental justice means just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, nationality, origin, income, or ability with respect to development, implementation, and evaluation of programs, practices, and activities that affect human health and the environment. I remind myself of these definitions so that we are working to make sure that our research goals are aligned with them. Likewise, what does underserved communities mean? What does EJ communities mean? So I'll share these slides and you can refer to them later on. I borrowed this dashboard from Northeast Illinois Climate and Environmental Justice Dashboard that Edith provided to us. This really shows where environmental justice communities are. And we are doing research to really look at how our research from environmental lens, that means temperature, humidity, particulate matter, ozone, and so on, can really impact with climate change to enhance environmental stresses. While at the same time, how can demographic distribution like gender, age, education, income, and so on, and in the future, the population growth can answer questions related to inequity. Our goal is to really bridge the gap between environmental justice and climate justice. because if we want to reach our climate neutrality goals of 2050, we really need to think not about today, but what the future holds and how can we tailor the policies that are in place so that we can achieve those goals. So we are working on these kind of frameworks. So if you look at social and environmental stresses, this is the income analysis over the last maybe 4 decades, and you can see the society in the Chicago area has become a lot more polarized. This is our work on emerging hotspots. These are the emerging hotspots which are based on the last 20 years of climate data sets. This is the map that I borrowed that really shows the burden on the society with the air quality lens and the heat vulnerability within the Chicago area that we developed. Statistics show that Chicago is 8th in income inequality among nation's largest cities. But at the same time, inequality is important because it encourages growth and progress. But how much inequality should we have so that we have a healthy inequality? So we are trying to answer these kind of questions while we do research. And also, if you know about Chicago region, we have a lot of crime rates. We are also trying to link how the temperature changes can really impact crime behavior. So this is taken from the data portal from Chicago, total crime rates over the last 2 decades. And as you can see, these kind of maps also have really good correlation with respect to the heat vulnerability that I showed in the previous slide. These maps show here the weekly crime rate versus temperature distribution over the last 20 years. And we have divided the crimes into non-property crimes, violent crimes, and non-indexed crimes, and trying to see the seasonal behavior of these crime rates. A lot of crime has decreased because a lot of things that the city has done with respect to reducing the crime rates. But we are trying to identify the causal relationship between temperatures or heat and crime, and what leads to aggression and how aggression really leads to eventually the crime occurrence. So we are trying the causality aspect, which is a little bit difficult, rather than just looking at correlations right now. So talking about visualization system, with the work that we are creating on environmental justice, we are trying to create something that is helpful for policymakers and staff, scientists and researchers, developers, and community members. And we are taking weather and climate data set, combining with demographic data so that we can have one platform where we could visualize. And the system is adaptable so that it meets new demands without requiring a complete rebuild and new functionality. We have been doing this for over 1.5 years, and we are taking some time so that we can make it something which is scalable, portable, and we don't have to do it again. We are meeting with the communities. This is a meeting we had with the caucus and the communities that participated here last year. And this is the work that was supported by NASA, and NASA also visited us. Headquarters people visited us to see how and where we are progressing in this goal. So our project is called eJust, Environmental Justice Using Urban Scalable Toolkit, which is flexible, extensible, reproducibility, portability, and scalability, and accessibility. So these are the 6 important criteria that we have so that we make something that can not just be used by Chicago metro area, but can be used in any part of the world. If you look traditionally, this is the behind the scenes at the back end. The code which is generally used is very, very long and extensive. We are also doing as a university fundamental research to make sure we don't have to write this long code, but how can we make it so compact that it can be used by others as well? So there's a lot of development going on that front. We are developing a front end where users can really interact, and then extensively developing a new level backend, which is easy to address issues related to portability, scalability, and accessibility that I talked about previously. This is how the toolkit would look like. I like to skip this slide where we'll have a science focus so that when the researchers really want to dive into the deeper details and make changes, they should be able to make changes. We would like to make it open access, while the public-facing interface should be very easy and navigatable for the communities to use. And it should be able to handle satellite data sets, model data sets, observations. It should be both science-facing and public-facing visualizations. So our toolkit has 3 components. First is spatial exploration. You can look at the map and see and click and see things around. And temporal evolution, if you click anywhere on a census tract, you should be able to see what it holds with respect to temperature, or air quality, or demographic information. Sorry. And the third one is analytics. Once you do that, you want to see some relationships between the variables. You should be able to see that too. So this is how the dashboard looks like. You can hide this grammar part so that it's easy. And as you enter the toolkit, if the toolkit will ask you who you are. If you are a community member, it will not give you this kind of interface. If you are a community member, then it will give you a very simple interface. But you can go inside and toggle and change whatever you want, but it will give a profile as soon as you enter. Here it shows temperatures, and these dots are observations. So you can see how the region, how we model temperatures with respect to these observations. And we'll add more observations as we make the prototype more active. We also have the ability to really see, this is, for example, temperature MODIS satellite datasets over the Chicago area, and also the social vulnerability index. You could be able to see these maps side by side. We are also adding the features of slider, so you can slide and compare and see two variables which are comparable to see what the impact is, maybe between the previous day and today, and so on. Now I'm going to give 1 minute overview of how the toolkit looks like. You can see on the top forecast, the temperature forecast will just load up. You can load satellite data set, demographic data sets, observations. Observations are in the dot. And our goal is to make this toolkit for like 7 days, 4 days historical and 3 days future, so that you always have a forecast mode. Our vision is for us to think about when we leave home, I'm in a habit to look at temperature daily. Should I wear a jacket or not? Should I take an umbrella or not? Can we create something like this so that communities can really use it in making their everyday decisions? Okay. We are also working on a new concept, hopefully in the next 3 months, called dynamic vulnerability. If you think about vulnerability, people produce static maps. We have done that too. But the concept of vulnerability changed within a day. If you are in the morning, you know, this is the area which is really pleasant. I'd like to take a walk. But in the afternoon, this side of my office or my house is better than this side because of the heat, right? How do we create concept, or neighborhoods? How do we create this concept of dynamic vulnerability so that people can make wise decisions throughout the day? So of course, we need a vulnerability map that is broadly speaking of the region, but the decisions that you take every day depends on different concepts. So we're trying to incorporate those. Okay, moving on. So in addition to that kind of framing, we're also making additions for urban planners. And this is another animation that really shows in a research mode, adding things on the fly. We're adding parks, water bodies, and roads to the toolkit. It's again 1 minute animation, so bear with me. We are applying it here right now, and it pops up, right? But when a user, community user is playing with it, they don't have to do, sorry. They don't have to do it. They can just use toggle buttons to activate layers. So once you do that, you can, let me go forward. You can activate buildings, and then you can look at shadow impacts and so on. So that can really help urban planners as well to really see through where the shading happens when they are planning changes in the buildings, or coming up with new buildings, or trying to add urban vegetation and tree planting efforts. So there are different ways in which we foresee our tool be used, be it for urban planning, environmental justice decisions, nature-based solutions, and either also for daily choices that you make in everyday life. So, okay, so in conclusion, we are in the midst of creating it. We have the prototype almost ready. And once we have it, we'd like to put it live on our website and maybe give another talk of how to use it, and maybe a tutorial to the community so that they can adapt, they can use it. And also would like to take feedbacks at that time where they think we need improvement so that we can have an iterative learning and improve our toolkit. So with this, I'll conclude and thank you.
Absolutely mind-boggling, Ashish. Thank you. That's really beautiful, and it's evolved so much since we started planning this. It seems very quickly. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Sharma? Questions or comments? Please raise your hand or put them in the chat. Agree, Kyra. Very good. So Ashish, we'll certainly have you back when you would like some feedback on the toolkit, and if you want to do some training, we would love to convene for you.
Sure, thank you.
And get some feedback. With that, we have a rather naive question in the chat here, which I'm just going to ask where your is that showing? Are you getting a poll pop up? Right. So if you wanted to just go ahead and click on that, do you know where your do you have a general idea of where residents who are most vulnerable to extreme heat live in your community? Sounds like when we have the toolkit, Ashish will be able to tell us exactly where and what time of day they're going to be most impacted. So pretty exciting. But for right now, are you able to track that? Looks great. Looks like most people are able to answer that. And if you have any anything specifically you want to share, unfortunately we're such a big group. So just put in your in the chat if you have any specific information to share about how you know that. So
Can I respond to the question?
Yeah, please. There's a question.
Yeah, so we are working on flood vulnerability maps for the whole research program as well. The thing that we are struggling with is we don't have the pipe network for the Chicago metro area. And we are creating something right now. Hopefully in next few months, we'll be able to share something on the flooding. But if we can get the pipe network data somehow, then it would really help us create much more realistic assessments. So we are frankly juggling between how can we get the data. So if any help that we can get on pipe network data, we would be able to provide much more robust answers on flood vulnerability.
Chris, you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to respond that all the municipalities should have their pipe networks mapped and probably in GIS. So if you reach out to them, they may be able to get that to you.
Oh, that would be great.
And
So
Christy, you have a question too, Christy
question.
Truitt?
So maybe it's an open question. We can really create these as a prototypes over one municipalities or multiple. If you have that map and if you think that as a need, we are happy to address that, and please share because there are 275 municipalities, right? Is share your data set or an email to us, and we'll start working over that region. I'll add my email address in the chat.
Sure. Christy Truitt, you have questions, timeline and scale?
Oh, yes, I think they were just kind of being answered. He said, it sounds like we could just contact him for those areas.
Just to add, right now, as this meeting is going on
But yes, I missed the very beginning, so I wasn't sure what the timeline was for when when the usable version would be available.
We hope to maybe prepare this during the summer. Maybe by July or August, we can have another meeting to showcase and demonstrate the toolkit and maybe take some feedback and questions. Regarding the flood vulnerability, we just completed an assessment for Quad Cities. And there's a press briefing going on right now where my postdoc is talking about it. So we'll be able to share the result, the work that we did in the Quad Cities on the flood vulnerability. We'll be happy to do something similar for Chicago.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing tool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for joining us and for your excellent work. And then just for thinking about municipalities and considering our needs in planning and thinking about the region. We really appreciate that. So with that, we're going to introduce the next speaker and the more partnerships that we have with University of Illinois and the US EPA. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Hong Hyuk Kim, who is an environmental epidemiologist and data scientist with the University of Illinois School of Public Health. Dr. Kim investigates why the health effects of environmental exposures and climate-related factors manifest differently across individuals, communities, and countries using quantitative data analysis and interdisciplinary thinking. Dr. Kim has taken over the leadership for the Climate and Health Institute, which is just a couple of years old, but it's a new idea that was launched at University of Illinois with US EPA funding, focusing on Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus communities. So Dr. Kim has taken over the Climate and Health Institute from Elena Grossman, who has moved on to another partner, GTI. So happy to have you here, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Hong-Hyuk Kim. So as introduced, I'm an assistant professor at University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. So my focus is like how to identify the environmental health disparities using the data science. So I'm an environmental epidemiologist looking at specifically like climate-related health impacts such as air pollution, the extreme heat, extreme weather event, and so on, and how to mitigate these exposures, and then related health outcomes. So today I'm going to briefly introduce the CHI, Climate and Health Institute, established in School of Public Health, funded by the US EPA Education Grant. So CHI was established to empower students and community members to take climate and health challenges in communities, specifically in the metropolitan areas in Chicagoland, and then to learn about and grow from the experience offered by the local communities and the other stakeholders. So we have the two pillars. The first is to prepare the future public health professionals to address the public health impacts from climate change. And the second is to increase the knowledge and awareness among civic leaders and community members, specifically in environmental justice communities, about the climate change public health impact and how to mitigate and adapt the climate related health impact. So in the first, this is a 2-year program, and in the first year, so we recruited 10 students in the University of Illinois Chicago. Some students are studying the public health, others are studying the different, like public policies or the engineering. And then each students are trained about the climate change and health, and then mitigation adaptation strategies, who are more vulnerable to climate risk factors. And then each students are paired with the 5 community partners: the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, City of Aurora, Hanover Park, Chicago Heights, and Waukegan. And I'm going to share some brief overview of the 5 projects are currently on the way. In the next slide. Yep. So first, Peter Carey, who is a graduate student in the School of Public Health, is working in the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and he will be presenting his exciting work on how to mitigate adapt to heat-related impacts in the Chicago area after me. So this will be presented soon. And next is Elora, Charlie, and Melissa. Post-graduate are working with the City of Aurora when it comes to how to disseminate, how to aggregate all the information when it comes to specific flooding and water quality issues, because they identified flooding and water quality issues are one of the most concerns in the City of Aurora. So that basically they are trying to making some website pamphlets, some educational, some channels to disseminate information about how to address the flooding and water quality issues under the climate change, specifically in the City of Aurora. And next is about the Hanover Park. The Samara Ray in the School of Public Health is working with the Hanover Park engineering team to identify some information about the commercial solar program, which is some kind of energy, how to address energy issues under climate change. And Chicago Heights, Adam Liaz in the School of Public Health again, to try to identify climate risk factor patterns such as the precipitation air pollution and heat, and creating the GIS map, geographical information system maps, to help us, Chicago Heights, to facilitate grant applications to address these issues. And then lastly, those in the city of Waukegan, Ellie Bowman and Sabrina Zhang in the University of Illinois Chicago is now the identify some of the specific needs in terms of the ravines in the Waukegan, and which offers the temperature regulation and air filtering. Among there are many other benefits when it comes to the ravines, and then how to protect the ravines, how to improve the ravine system in the city of Waukegan, and then they also conducted a nice survey and then trying to make some environmental, educational program when it comes to how to clean their environment, especially the ravine in the city of Waukegan. So working with the many various stakeholders in there. Okay, so let me stop here, and then so thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Hong Hyuk. And I also want to thank the US EPA for their support of this project. And Elena's in a vision in terms of putting this together. So we've really been appreciative of the students and the municipal hosts working together for Climate and Health Institute. And any questions for Dr. Kim before we move on?
Thank you, Edith. I have one question. As it relates to the work that's going to be done with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, can you elaborate on what that scope of work is going to look like?
Coming up next.
Yeah,
So-
this is yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. So Pete Carey is up next, and he is our. This is his work that he's been doing with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, really putting this meeting together and this panel, and then the research that he's done. He's about to share just in minutes here. So we've been thrilled. I've been thrilled to work with Pete for almost 8 months now. Pete is a third-year graduate student in the University of Illinois School of Public Health. He's been a founding member of the Climate and Health Institute, and his project here is part of the Applied Practical Experience requirement. In that time, he's developed expertise around the topic of municipal interventions and planning for extreme heat response, particular to our region. So some of those deficits in thinking and that we haven't done much in the Midwest, Pete is on it. He's been doing some work on that. And Pete also has been working in the healthcare field, doing data analytics since 2016. So he's not a stranger to public health, and really thrilled to have his expertise, and we'll be enjoying Pete's presentation up next.
Yes, thank you, Edith. Your timing is perfect, Mayor Thompson. So as Edith said, I am graduating in a few weeks from the health policy program at UIC. As a part of that, I participated in the Climate and Health Institute and was matched with the caucus as my community partner. And Edith actually identified extreme heat as something that we could build out for the caucus. So that's what leads us here today. So I'm very excited to be talking to you all. And just to get started, we wanted to start with our second survey question for the day. So has your municipality identified extreme heat impacts as a challenge through a planning process, whether that be a comprehensive sustainability or strategic plan or otherwise? And per usual, please feel free to tell us more about the plan in the chat. Okay, looks like we have about 35 votes in, pretty even split between the 4 options, which is interesting. Okay.
Responses have slowed.
Yeah, looks
And
like we're 41 in, looks like a good amount. Yeah, and so, yes, for 27% of the votes, to the remainder, the remaining 73% of either working on it to no. So definitely room for growth in the area, as we've mentioned for background, where flooding is the #1 issue here, and heat is second to that. But as we'll get into it, there are a lot of co-benefits I think we can introduce in solutions that address both here. All right, so briefly for the agenda, it's been broken into 3 separate sections. Starting with background, I will caveat that I can provide nothing even remotely close to what Dr. Sharma provided in terms of technical background, but I will give a very high level and just iterate on a few different areas that I want to emphasize. Then getting into some solutions, which are broken down into green infrastructure, cooling resources, and building envelope for more housing directed. And then getting into funding solutions. So these are very federally focused. And I know there's a lot of acronyms here, but we'll get into each of the departments and the grant programs that they offer. And then something I'm really excited about, just some specific new IRA programs that have been spun out from that legislation, which I think have some great potential. So starting with background. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is actually a chart that was taken from the caucus's climate action plan. And so this shows projected annual days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the Northern Illinois area under both high and moderate emissions scenarios. And as Mayor Thompson mentioned, the 1995 heat wave was one of the most transformative heat or weather events in our city's history. And it kind of underscores that a lot of climate change communication is steeped in future impacts, but climate change is happening today, and we are feeling it now. And actually a quote from Dr. Ebi from a UIC climate lecture I heard last week with Dr. Kim, actually, that she mentioned, we have not had a normal climate since 1980. So anyone born after 1980 has never experienced a climate that has not been impacted by greenhouse gases. So we are experiencing climate change now. But at the same time, this is not a pass-fail proposition. It is really up to us to determine where we fall in between these scenarios. So wanted to emphasize that. So I have a map here very similar to what Dr. Sharma has. It's probably outdated by a decade to what he has to the minute data. But while we are already experiencing increased heat, as I mentioned, this is not being felt equally across our region. So those in disadvantaged communities often feel the brunt of the heat, including increased urban heat island effect due to the built environment. With the fewer trees, as we saw in certain areas, and just more pavement. You can see these differences that are broken out on the map here of the land surface temperature from one of the hottest days of the year in 2014 across our region. You can see that it really does correlate with the city and some of our more disadvantaged communities. And to underscore that, this is another similar map to what Dr. Sharma had. These are areas identified as low income and disadvantaged communities, otherwise known as LIDAC. And if you're wondering why Wisconsin and Indiana have snuck in here, it's the metropolitan statistical area, so they are included as well. But the higher surface temperatures really do correlate pretty well with the LIDAC communities that we're seeing on this map. So the people who are often more vulnerable have more demographic risks from just being in disadvantaged communities. Not only their health vulnerability, but they also, the area, their built environment they live in is hotter than more advantaged areas. So want to just emphasize the disparities of, there are people who can work inside and do not have to or have access to air conditioning. And there are those that cannot do that and often feel the impact of that heat more acutely. And so then from the disparities in feeling the extreme heat, what is the actual impact on our human health? So We have the, we're all aware, the increase of morbidity and mortality risk for extreme heat. As Dr. Sharma mentioned, there are higher rates of violence and behavioral issues, including homicide and suicide. And then there is a overburdened local health system that has a reduced capacity to actually respond to these health issues. And then, as I mentioned, the people that don't have access to AC or have to work outside, they have a reduced work capacity in the area as well. And then the table on the left side here is actually pulled from the caucus's PCAP. So this is calling out the magnitude of impact for extreme heat. So for general public health, it is marked as high, as you would expect, but there are also aspects like transportation, energy, and emergency services, and just community and culture in general that also have, that also are impacted as well. So extreme heat impacts all over our society. So what can we do about it? And even though it's going to get hotter, there are ways that we can adapt to lessen the harm to our health and our communities. And with that, before we get into solutions, we're going to start the third survey question of what heat intervention strategies are currently available to your residents?
Bear with me trying to
Sure.
launch that one.
And if you do have other, I would love to hear about them. I love hearing the creative solutions people have already come up with. I did not know that about Norwich, Patrick. Thank you for putting that in there. And Jody, you are teaming up perfectly for my next slides here. So I appreciate that for the pavement focused message. And you too, Chris, this is teaming up. And it looks like we have about 40 votes in here. So it looks like we have a good amount. And cooling centers and social media communications seem to be the highest proportion of strategy implemented. So very cool. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation in the chat. And many of the things that you all have mentioned are going to be highlighted in the next few slides here. So solutions, the overall strategy really broken into three categories: green infrastructure, cooling resources, and building envelope. If you're wondering why there's a flamingo in the pool, Edith and I noticed it when we were making this slide, and we wanted to spruce up the very basic black icon. So wanted to make it a bit more fun there. So for the first category of green infrastructure, I know there's a lot of text on this table. I'm not expecting you to read it all, but the main thing I want to emphasize here is the benefits of implementing green infrastructure. You have things that have been mentioned in the chat already for green roofs, cool roofs, planting trees, pavement focused. And all of these things don't just have one benefit to them. Not only are they addressing extreme heat, but they're also addressing things like stormwater management for the highest priority issue in the area of flooding. reducing energy use, improving air quality, and also just making it more comfortable for people to live in the community. And so then, and just for the strategies I'm going to go over here, it's just the general idea is we are trying to propose ideas of projects that you will likely already have to do as a municipality, but just integrating heat resilience into that. Okay, so the first example here is pavement focus. So forgive me, I'm forgetting who mentioned Jody. Mentioned the extensive message in the chat about pavement. So I really appreciate you setting the table for this. But pavement, like I mentioned, I wanted to start with this because every municipality has to deal with sidewalks, parking lots, streets. And so there's a lot of pavement that can be made more amenable to reducing extreme heat. So there are two solutions for pavement, one of them being cool pavement, the other being permeable. For the former, cool pavement is it's a relatively low cost initiative where you are really just applying a higher albedo material to your pavement. And all that albedo means is just the ability to reflect sunlight. If you have an albedo of 0, you have perfect black where you absorb all sunlight. If you're an albedo of 1, you reflect all sunlight. That's really all it means. And at the bottom of the slide here, actually, this is a case study from the Smart Surfaces Coalition, which I highly recommend, and you'll see more of them later on in the slides. But they did a case study that compared a standard asphalt parking lot to that parking lot with cool pavement painted on, and you can see the difference in surface temperature, about 45 degrees. So a pretty stark difference between the two. And then for permeable pavement, this has actually been a much more popular policy solution for our area. And actually all the local examples I've included in the slide are permeable pavement examples. The cool pavement solutions are they've been more tried out in the American Southwest, which Edith mentioned. They have been leading the way because it's much more of a very acute issue for extreme heat in that area. And forgive me if there are other municipalities on this call that I did not mention for a local example that have done cool pavement or permeable pavement. I would love to hear about them. But for permeable pavement, you have the co-benefits of not only stormwater management and flooding control, but also addressing the urban heat island effect as well, with the ability to apply the cool pavement materials on top, and also helping with the stormwater management helps to reduce that heat island effect as well. And just to go back to the disparities on the background I mentioned earlier, this also targets the heat island reduction where it's most needed, because those LIDAC communities are areas where there's a lot of pavement and there's not a lot of tree cover. And so it really does target where it's most needed. So then getting into roofs, and I'm not sure why this the MMC picture is not showing up here, but for roofs, it's really the same concept of, and for some reason it's showing in my preview as well, but there are cool roofs and there are green roofs. So same concept for cool roofs as cool pavement. You're applying a higher albedo material to your roof. And again, there's a case study included from Smart Surfaces at the bottom here of the difference between a standard roof with black shingles to one with the higher albedo material applied. And there's an over 40-degree difference in surface temperature there. For green roofs, I really wish this image generated, but I included a picture of the caucus's office in the city at the old post office, which has a beautiful green roof. And there are a lot of options you can pursue for those. At its most basic, just adding vegetation to the rooftop. There are ways you can add in solar panels to those as well, add in a blue and green roof for water management as well. But for both of these, they also do an excellent job at reducing the urban heat island effect. In addition, and thank you, Cheryl, for posting that, cool roofs are another low-cost intervention. And we have the added benefit of not only reducing surface temperature heat, but you're also reducing your building's energy demand for heating and cooling because it's not absorbing that heat with the dark roof shingles. And then additional co-benefits of green roofs of managing better air quality and stormwater management as well. So just trying to start off with the surfaces of projects where you likely already have infrastructure projects that are needed in the area, but just trying to get the thought in your head of how can we integrate heat resilience into a project that we are already pursuing? And it can unlock additional funding opportunities as well, which we'll get into. So getting into trees, trees are one of the first one of the most talked about climate solutions you can have, but I wanted to include them as well. On the left here, we have a map of Lombard's tree dashboard, which I think is an awesome resource that they have on their website. It not only tracks their tree canopy, but also quantifies the benefits of their tree canopy coverage. So I think it's a great way of communicating the benefits of tree canopy coverage. So I highly recommend clicking the link for Lombard there. Everything that has an underline in this presentation is going to be or is hyperlinked. So please feel free to click on those in the slides afterwards. But again, co-benefits for trees where you plant them, improving air quality, reducing the urban heat island effect through evapotranspiration, which actually Edith taught me what it was of absorbing. Really all it is water's absorbed into trees through roots, and they're transpired out through the leaves, creating condensation and cooling the general area. And then we're also reducing building energy demand as well, similar to the green and cool roofs, and then also providing direct shading. Also wanted to call out the Midwest Climate Collaborative, which Indianapolis, Kansas City, Madison, and St. Louis are doing. They landed the first federal grant to address heat island effect through community-inspired solutions to maintain trees. So I would recommend keeping an eye on them for really good research. And then going back to Robert Israel's comment that tree canopy coverage for your municipality is being covered as well. So great to hear people doing good work on trees. And then for bioswales, what is a bioswale? Quickly, it is just a sloped vegetated area that's designed to hold stormwater drainage. This also has even though the primary benefit is stormwater management, it also has the added benefit of reducing the urban heat island effect and also increasing local biodiversity. Another case study from our friends at Smart Surfaces showing the difference in surface temperature between a standard parking lot and one with a bioswale implemented. And then calling out Villa Park and Blue Island for doing great stuff for bioswales. Okay, for building envelope, this is really a CDBG focused slide, and I'll be quick with this one because we're getting into it with the panel. But I wanted to call out that CDBG, that HUD actually responded with communications after the Pacific Northwest heat dome in 2021, where many of the residents did not have air conditioning resources because without climate change, an event like that was not possible. And they explicitly stated that CDBG funds can be used to help communities respond to heat waves. And at the very bottom here, you can see not only for public facilities and services, but also for resident housing to improve air conditioning or to install air conditioning and improve the energy efficiency of the home. And also wanted to call out that I also included the IRA energy efficiency home improvement tax credit programs, where if you as the municipality are not able to provide the resources through CDBG funding, residents can also access that privately. for tax rebates. Okay, and so I think okay. I was gonna say, we're running a little bit short on time. I did want to get to funding. So we'll be brief for this survey, and I'm gonna hop right into funding here. And we wanted to ask for additional strategies just to get maybe something was triggered in your head with the solutions we implemented with co-benefits, but just wanted to see if there were other things that came to mind. Okay. And Kyra, that is a really interesting question about taking away parking for businesses. Okay. Seems to be a pretty even split for additional. I'm curious on what the additional ones are, but we'll keep moving over here to funding. Okay, so these are nice ideas. How are we going to pay for them? So I'm going to go department by department at the federal level. The first two programs I want to highlight are for the Department of Transportation. They are the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program. Again, these are hyperlinked to the application page, so you can go directly to them. They're both formula funding, and they're both related to improving resilience of transportation infrastructure. So bike paths, parking lots, streets, integrating green infrastructure into those to make them more resilient. And they're both administered through CMAP as well. Then the next two programs for the Department of Transportation that I want to call out are the PROTECT program, which is just promoting resiliency for transportation, and the Healthy Streets program, which is one of those new IRA programs, which I'm really excited about. The Healthy Streets program is competitive funding. The federal cost sharing can go up to 100% if you are a certain disadvantaged community and can prove that. And this one focuses specifically on cool and permeable pavements and tree cover. I think it's an awesome program. I was not able to find an application for this one because it's so new. I actually signed up for the Department of Transportation newsletter at Edith's recommendation, and it's been defunct since 2016, so I couldn't find it that way. But I think this is a really exciting program. And so for HUD, I'm going to skip right over this for Community Development Block Grant. For FEMA, one program I want to call out that is actually pre-disaster mitigation and not the traditional FEMA funding after disaster is the BRIC program of Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, which focuses on pre-disaster mitigation and making sure that your infrastructure is resilient. And this is competitive funding as well. And then last two slides here for the USDA, speaking of tree canopy coverage, the USDA as part of the IRA legislation was given $1 billion for tree equity grants. That for our region is administered through the Chicago Regional Trees Initiative, and 100% of the funds are for disadvantaged communities, and I have an eligibility map linked here as well. And then last but not least, funding for the EPA, the very large program from the IRA legislation of the Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grants. I really wanted to highlight these because they call out that their projects focus specifically on mitigating climate and health risks from urban heat islands and extreme heat, amongst other things. One thing to call out, though, is that for eligibility, you must be a disadvantaged community, sticking with the IRA legislation, and you actually must partner with a community-based organization. So you cannot apply for this alone as a local government. You must partner with the CBO, because the intent of this is to have community-based voices heard to drive change in the community. And these will all be allocated by 2026. So we've got a few years left here. And so a complete list of references I used and hyperlinked will be distributed via email. And just thank you very much. Thank you to Edith and everyone at the caucus for working with me these last 9 months. It has been a blast to learn about climate policy with you all.
Excellent work, Pete. Really grateful for your very thorough efforts and work. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
We are a little low on time. Any questions for Pete that you can't put in the chat? Yes, I would like to turn it over to my colleague. We'll continue this conversation, but we now move to a panel, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ben Schnelly from the Mayor's Caucus, who staffs the Housing Committee, to introduce the panel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Schnelly. I work in housing initiatives for the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I'll be really brief with this setup, but we've talked about the issue. We've given a broad overview of some funding resources, and I will zoom in on one specific funding resource, being the Community Development Block Grant. So I'm very happy to be facilitating a panel here with 3 guest speakers, Chris Ragona from the city of Aurora, Curtis Posier from the village of Bensonville, and Tom Thompson from the town of Cicero. So to start off, I'll just ask you each to briefly introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role, how long you've been in the position, and what your relationship is to the CDBG program.
Sure, Ben, I can start. I am Chris Ragona, the Community Development Manager for the City of Aurora. My division primarily handles all of the Community Development Block Grant that the city receives directly. We also review and hand out grants and loans through our Home Investment Partnerships program, which is to preserve and expand affordable housing, as well as administer. The city has a gaming tax through our local casino, where we provide additional grants to nonprofit agencies.
Yeah, I can go next. Curtis Posey, I'm the Director of Community Economic Development here in Bensonville. I guess, as compared to the other 2 communities on the panel here, we are a non-entitlement community. We actually have to apply to DuPage County for any CDBG funding. So we're sort of beholden on them, and, whatever their kind of programs are for that funding, we don't manage, our funds, ourselves. My department actually doesn't handle much of the CDBG process at all. It's mainly a public works program here, so a little different. So.
All right, I'm Tom Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of the Town of Cicero's Department of Housing. I've been in my current role for 4 years. Prior to that, I was Building Commissioner in Town of Cicero, and I also sit on the Zoning Board of Appeals. We recently redid our zoning code to require increased green spaces. So I'm really excited about talking about heat resiliency, because it is a very important topic.
Thank you, Tom. And I know you're doing great work in Cicero related to this, which we'll get to. I have just a handful of questions, and we might have time for questions from the group as well. Mm-hmm. But Chris, I'll start with you. If you could give just a high-level overview of the Community Development Block Grant Program. If I'm a resident, or if I'm an elected official or a commissioner, what's the essential information on how the CDBG program works?
Sure. So we, on an annual basis, trying to assess the unmet needs in the city. And, we are a very big city and we have a lot of unmet needs. So we try and distribute the money as evenly as we can through a variety of different programs. I think for this conversation, we look at energy efficiency. We've focused on a few things in the past. So we have a few different single-family rehab programs, which are generally reserved for emergency repairs, which can include HVAC. So in the middle of the winter, if someone's furnace goes out, we can potentially assist there. The same thing in the summer. If we have someone who's elderly, whose air conditioning unit goes out, we can potentially assist. We've done park improvements in the past, which have had splash pads constructed in low-income neighborhoods. We have funded large multifamily rehabs for window replacement, energy efficiency. Windows that were single pane from the 1950s. We were able to go in and replace all of those windows. And then, unrelated to this, we do several programs for job training, homelessness assistance, sheltering for our domestic violence survivors. And we've done some other infrastructure improvements as well. So, each year we try and look and see, what partners have the capacity to assist. And we provide small grants, sometimes as small as 10,000, all the way up to $1 million, depending on the need.
Thank you, Chris. And Curtis, you already hinted at this being a non-entitlement community, but could you share what that means and how that might differ from City of Aurora?
Yeah, so essentially DuPage County receives the funding for the non-entitlements, and then you apply to them. It's through a grant process. They basically have a community development commission that will, convene and vote on, different applications. They actually, so their application process, right now they got 4 basic programs out there, but they only go out on a call for applications every 2 to 3 years. I think the last call they did for the program that we typically go to was 2022. So we think they're due for another one coming up shortly, although we haven't seen anything about that yet. So yeah, it's interesting in that sense, right? You're always sort of a little behind on and not knowing what you can apply for, what kind of programs they're going to come up with. Right now they got kind of a basic community development block grant, like 60,000 minimum type program. That's kind of the catch-all for what you would typically spend on CBG projects. The one we typically apply to is called the Neighborhood Investment Program. It's for kind of the low mod specific fixing up residential areas. And then so we have historically used that to go after infrastructure grants. And the way those are scored with the county, generally when you're putting in green infrastructure into those, planned projects, you're going to score higher. So it's just naturally you're adding that kind of stuff into projects, which ends up being a more resilient long-term type thing. But you're kind of, like I said, kind of beholden on what the county's programming is for the funding and what those application calls are.
And there are many non-entitlement communities, smaller communities where entitlement has to do somewhat with size. But definitely recommend reaching out to your municipality to understand that important distinction. This is a question for either Chris or Tom. Chris, you mentioned each year Aurora goes about deciding what to do with the CDBG funds. What exactly is the process of that decision?
So similar to, I think, Curtis, we do a call for projects on an annual basis, typically towards the end of the summer to prepare for the following year. We have a competitive application process looking at a variety of different things when we review our applications. And then we relate that back to our 5-year plan to determine, what's going to be the best fit. I think an interesting example is we conducted our 5-year plan in the summer of 2019. Our city council approved it in January of 2020, which had energy efficiency as an unmet need. And then, as we all know, 45 days later, the pandemic hit. So we completely pivoted from our 5-year plan and focused more on providing basic needs such as food and shelter, programs for rental assistance. And we really, we didn't abandon our 5-year plan, but we completely changed it because the 5-year plan had totally changed. So this summer, again, we'll be conducting our next 5-year plan for 2025 to 2029. And it'll be interesting to see, what has changed over the last 5 years. Is there a much higher need for energy efficiency programs, or can we build those energy efficiency, toolings into some of the things that we're doing, not only for, infrastructure improvements, but for potentially facility improvements for our nonprofits, or for, what is our very old, in some neighborhoods, housing that's 100 years old, that's not very energy efficient. So how can we utilize CDBG funds and then leverage them with some of the other programs that Pete talked about and that, the city has access to? So to finish on my point, we offer the application open to, local businesses, nonprofits, as well as other city divisions at the end of the summer. We go through a competitive application process, link it back to our plan, and then we make our recommendations to City Council generally in January of the following year.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll just underline that term, the 5-year plan or the consolidated plan, being a technical term required by HUD for communities, entitlement communities, to determine what to do with CDBG funds.
Thank you.
Tom, I'll go ahead and give you a 2-part question. One, if there's anything you'd like to add about that consolidated planning process and how Cicero determines what to use CDBG funds for, beyond what Chris said, feel free to share. But I'm really interested, and I think attendees here would be interested to hear about Cicero's use of CDBG for those emergency needs during the summer. related to air conditioning.
Okay, the only thing that I would add to the planning process is that there is extensive collaboration with both the community as well as social service agencies. We hold several public hearings throughout the process to get input from the community and other organizations, as well as contacting, our local continuum of care, different public service agencies directly to get data from them as to what their documented needs are when we are putting together our goals. As far as the way we utilize funds, it's very similar to the way Chris explained it. We also have an emergency cooling program. We pre-bid, pre-qualify a contractor based on unit pricing. So if someone's air conditioning unit goes out during the summer, we can dispatch that tech out to that person's property and either repair or replace the unit, dependent on how it's assessed, on site. Some things can be easily repaired. Some things don't throw good money at bad. To be a qualified candidate for that program, you have to be low to moderate income. You have to be a senior or have a doctor's note documenting that you do need air conditioning. And the third thing is, the air conditioning has to be pre-existing. So if someone just doesn't have air conditioning, we're not going to install a central air unit on an emergency basis. They can contact our other agencies in the town that give away window air units for people that do not have air conditioning. But if they had central air and it broke, we would repair or replace it. And that's up to $5,000 in the CDBG funds.
Well, thank you, Tom. And I'd encourage anyone with questions to go ahead and share them in the chat or maybe wait and raise your hand here. But one question to sort of wrap us up here, two-part question for each of you is, what are the main challenges that municipalities face in using CDBG funds to combat extreme heat? And looking ahead, how do you see the role of CDBG changing as Pete shared, as the future impacts of heat will be changing? How do you see the program potentially changing over the next 5, 10, 20 years in your community? So what are the present challenges and what do you see, the future evolutions of this use of CDBG being?
As far as challenges, I think inflation is a big challenge right now. The cost of everything has increased dramatically, especially with residential projects. There's certain thresholds that if you meet, you have to then kick in lead, hazard requirements. So I mentioned before about $5,000. If we spend more than $5,000 in CDBG funds at a resident, we have to do a risk assessment and do, paint film stabilization of all the treated painted surfaces in that property. If we spend more than $24,999, we have to abate all the lead hazards that were in those properties. And finding qualified contractors to perform that work is difficult enough, and it just increases the budget in those properties probably tenfold. CDBG really hasn't changed all that much over the years, so I without people like us kind of advocating and bothering our federal officials to try to make changes in a program, I don't think it's going to change all that much. I would encourage everyone here to call their U.S. senators or U.S. reps and at least at a minimum try to increase those thresholds for that lead paint kick-ins, I'll call them. They've been in place for decades, and $5,000 doesn't go very far anymore. So we require our homeowners to then throw in their own money to offset. And these are the people that probably don't have extra money, in their bank account too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. For the public facility projects, if we spend $1 in CDBG funds, federal regulations take over the entire project. So Davis-Bacon wage decisions, Section 3 business concerns, the way you procure your contractors. So all those things can increase costs as well. So a challenge we see here is a lot of agencies won't apply for CDBG for facility projects just because the amount of money we're going to give them is not going to offset the additional costs that all the other regulations kind of go along with it. I don't know how to solve that one. Give us more money and we'll make it lucrative for them too, I guess.
Just to restate the question for Curtis and Chris, what are the present challenges, and do you see anything really changing in the future about CDBG and responding to heat?
Yeah, I can touch on mine. I mean, I mentioned it already a little bit. I guess it's, we're kind of beholden to the county on what their programming is for the funding, and then I think the 2 to 3 year application calls are a little. It'd be nice if they were annual. If we had more, if you could get into it more, and then you could change the programming a little bit too. They could, if heat's more of an issue and they could actually focus on that, then we'd have the ability to apply for things like that. So right now you're just sort of, depending on, what the county's interested in and spending on. And, a little bit of that is issues of equity too. I mean, are we getting our fair share? We are a disadvantaged community, one of the more disadvantaged kind of areas in DuPage County. Are we getting, our fair share of the funding, which realistically is how DuPage is qualifying for a good chunk of there. So, those are the challenges for us is really just figuring out, can we get enough of the funding that we think we deserve, and do we have areas to spend it on? We've been traditionally doing, street lights and infrastructure where we can. We're running out of places to plant trees. We have a pretty good tree planting program here, but you can only plant so many. So will they open it up for heat or for doing other types of programming? Then yeah, that'd be interesting. I think the future, what we think we're going to be spending it on is lead service line replacements. I think that's going to be a big one. We've done pretty good at identifying our community's lead service lines, and then working with those who don't need the funding to get those replaced. But if we got to go in there and do any of our connections, we think we're going to be able to use CDBG to get in there and help. So that's kind of where we're focused on right now, just because that's such a huge issue here in Illinois. But
be careful with that, because we tried to implement that here in Cicero, and we were told we can only do the towns, what's on the town side of the water main. We can't do the connection to the house. So you get into a real tricky spot there where the lead line still goes to the person's house. City says we replaced the lead line, but technically the lead line is still there. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. We've been dealing with that with identifying which ones go in and what's ours and what we can and can't. Yeah.
Cool.
So I'll echo Tom. With any federal program, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of thresholds. Sometimes utilizing block grant with prevailing wage and some of the other requirements may cancel out and potentially increase the cost of a project. Our allocation has been trending downward. So the annual allocation across the entire federal budget has remained relatively stagnant. So with our amount, slowly going down and inflation going up, the amount that we can do with our dollars is decreasing each year. We've had to increase some of our thresholds for our single family rehab program because the cost of things has just gone way up. Roof replacements that used to cost $7,500 are now costing $15,000, and this is only within the last 5 years or so. And I think for us, when we look at CDBG, which for a federal program is very flexible, we look at can we do 15 affordable homes that maybe have some energy efficiency components relative to our building code and the state code, or can we only do 7 to 10 affordable units that maybe have all of those energy efficiency components, because the costs are higher to do all of that. And I don't know if there's a right or wrong reason or a right or wrong way on those, but that's just something that we do look at. The same thing with infrastructure, some of the things that Pete touched on, street resurfacing with regular asphalt is cheaper than permeable pavers, But on the negative side, it is going to contribute to hotter surface temperatures. So I think we are going to have a greater emphasis on climate resiliency in our next 5-year plan, more than our last 5-year plan. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback we get from the public, what data sets have been updated from various tables we look at. And, maybe there'll be more of an effort, at least leveraging our CDBG dollars to potentially fund or incorporate some of the things that we talked about today.
Well, thank you. I'll highlight some next steps, which we've already talked about. If your community is receiving CDBG directly as an entitlement community, be engaged in the next consolidated plan process. If you're a community like Bensonville that receives it from the county, contact the county and learn more about how that process works. So I see we have one question in the chat, if we can answer it real quick. Chris asked, can IRA rebates be paired with CDBG? New topic, maybe you haven't come across it. It's okay if we don't have an answer, but if you do have a quick answer, we'll be curious.
So for the most part, CDBG can be layered on most sources of funding, as long as your activity is eligible. So we've had in housing projects 6, 7, 8 types of funding in a project. I've never worked with that source in particular, but to my knowledge, I don't know of any source of funding that can't be used with CDBG, as long as you can demonstrate that CDBG is like the gap that is without this project or without this funding, like you can't do the project.
Thank you, Chris. I'll go ahead and wrap up this panel with a big thank you to each of you. I know you're very involved in the Housing Committee, and thank you for joining us in this joint meeting. So we'll share contacts out in the follow-up if anyone wants to ask more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, with tax credits, our contracts with homeowners are between the contractor and the homeowner. I don't know what the legalities would be, since it's a grant from us, but the homeowner is going to have documentation that they have those upgrades. So I guess it's possible they could apply for tax credits as well.
Yep. Thank you, Tom. Edith, do you want to close us and talk about next steps?
Just a quick wrap. Thank you, everyone. What an excellent panel. A lot of research went into this, and then just capitalizing on some of the great work that Ashish is doing and Pete has done, and then Chris, Curtis, and Tom. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on that, and then putting our heads together as like I said, we do. I actually get that from Mayor John Ostenberg. We used to use that phrase. Mayor of Park Forest always said we put our heads together. So that's what it feels like when we do these collaborative meetings, and then also really rich just doing it joint with the Housing Committee. So I'm sorry, Mayor Burns missed that today. Mayor Thompson, if you're on, do you want to say anything in quick closing? Don't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for participating with us today. Thank you, Edith, for co-chairing for Mayor Burns in this last minute conversation as it relates to his not being able to participate. But it was a really good conversation that took place today. And this is the work that we do every day. Partnerships and collaborations, they truly do work when we participate and engage. So thank you all and have a great week.
Thank you. And it's on the agenda, but just a reminder, the next Environment Committee meeting, we meet on the 3rd Tuesdays at this time. We're actually moving it up to 9:30 in the future. So it'll still be a 90-minute meeting. And we are going to talk about national perspective of metropolitan governance from the Management Transmission Lab at Indiana University, who has studied the Greenest Region Compact and some of our climate work. So that's going to be a fun conversation, organizing and institutionalizing local sustainability, May 21st. And Ben, do you want to do the next housing meeting? You want to mention that?
Sure. So the next Housing and Community Development Committee meeting will be May 16th, and the topic will be housing rehabilitation programs. So what are the best practices from municipalities that administer housing rehab programs? What are some guidance for communities that have not yet implemented them but are interested in kickstarting a program?
And if you think we should do these joint meetings, give us a thumbs up in the chat, and we're happy to put together another one with the two committees. Thank you, everyone.